A small house near River Rouge in Ecorse, one of the poorest stretches in a city that was already dying. Inside that house, in the winter of 1985, a 17-year-old boy named Demetrius Flenory sat at the kitchen table with his younger brother Terry and watched their father come through the front door looking like a man who had just lost a war. Charles Flenory was a carpenter, a guitarist, a songwriter, a genuinely gifted one, the kind of musician who would later be added to the Sacred Steel Hall of Fame in Ohio for writing the gospel hit Jump for Joy with the Campbell Brothers. He was a man of God, a man who went to church, kept his Bible open on the table, and believed that hard work and faith would lift his family out of poverty. But hard work wasn't delivering anything in Detroit in the 1980s. The auto plants that had built the city were closing. The factories that employed the middle class were sending jobs overseas. The neighborhoods that had never recovered from the 1967 riots were falling apart into empty lots and boarded-up houses. Unemployment in Southwest Detroit was through the roof. The crack epidemic was spreading like a bomb going off in every direction. And Charles Flenory, a man who played guitar and built things with his hands, was watching everything he had worked for disappear. The mortgage was late. The bills were stacking up. Lucille, his wife, told him plainly that what they were bringing in wasn't enough. The house was slipping away. Demetrius, the boy they would later call Big Meech, offered his father money. He had it. He had been making it on the streets. He tried to hand it to his father right there in the kitchen. And Charles Flenory looked at his son and refused. He would rather lose the house than take drug money. That moment broke something in both boys. Not because their father was wrong, because he was right, and it didn't matter. Being right didn't pay the mortgage. Being right didn't put food in the refrigerator. Being right didn't fix the stove that Meech and Terry could barely light in the morning. Being right in 1985 Detroit was something poor black families could not afford. Years later, from inside a federal prison, Big Meech explained it in the simplest words anyone ever used to describe why a person turns to the streets. It was just about being poor, man. We on welfare at the gas station with food stamps. We keep catching the bus with holes in the bottom of your shoes. That was the motivation. We got to do something fast. Once me and my brother got a real taste of money, it's like you don't never want that feeling to go away. They did something. They did something fast. And they built the largest black criminal organization the world has ever seen. $270 million, 500 employees, 11 states, direct supply lines to Mexican drug cartels, a hip-hop empire that worked alongside Jay-Z, Diddy, Young Jeezy, and Fabulous, a fleet of Maybachs, Bentleys, Ferraris, and Aston Martins, 13 mansions across the country. And it all started in a kitchen on Edsel Street with two brothers who couldn't light the stove. This is the story of the Black Mafia family. To understand how Demetrius and Terry Flenory became Big Meech and Southwest T, you have to understand what Detroit looked like in the 1980s. Lil Meech, Big Meech's son, who plays his father in the Starz series BMF, put it this way in an interview. He grew up in poverty. You see how Detroit was in the 1980s. My dad literally told me that at 14, 15, 16 years old, he was walking to school with holes in his shoes, walking over dead bodies in drug-infested communities, walking over dead bodies to school. As a teenager, that was the daily reality. Detroit in 1985 was a war zone. The crack epidemic had turned entire neighborhoods into open-air drug markets. The murder rate was one of the highest in the world. Not the country, the world. The city that Henry Ford built, the city that Motown made famous, the city that had once been the engine of the American middle class, was falling apart from the inside out. In 1967, race riots had burned entire blocks to the ground. Governor George Romney sent in the National Guard. President Johnson sent federal troops. The Kerner Commission studied the causes. Nothing changed. The neighborhoods never recovered. The factories never came back. By the time Meech and Terry were teenagers, what was left of Southwest Detroit was a wasteland of poverty, addiction, and violence that made the evening news look like a documentary about a country that had given up. Young Boyz Incorporated, one of the first organized street gangs in the city, had already set the example. Recruit children, sell crack in $10 bags, and make more money in a week than their parents made in a year. The Chamber brothers, who would later inspire the movie New Jack City, were running a drug empire out of a single house on Albion Street, bringing in $1 to $3 million a week. Meech and Terry watched all of it. They did not just see it from a distance, they looked up to it. While other kids in Southwest Detroit looked up to the Tigers and the Lions, the Flenory brothers looked up to the Chamber brothers and YBI. Those were the only men in the neighborhood who had money. Those were the only men who looked like they had escaped. The Flenory household was deeply religious. Charles and Lucille raised their children Meech, Terry, and their younger sister Nicole on prayer, church, and the belief that education was the way out. Terry was the academic one. He was smart, focused, and genuinely interested in school. At one point, he was being recruited by Western Michigan University. He could have been the first male in the Flenory family to graduate from high school and go to college. But the streets do not wait for transcripts. Meech was the first to go. He started working at a crack house run by a dealer named Pat, telling his parents he had gotten a job at Wendy's. When Terry found out the truth, he did not tell on his brother. He demanded in. He wanted to join. At first, Meech turned him down. Pat could only pay for one. But eventually, Meech changed his mind and called Terry over to the car. That was the moment. Two brothers side by side, riding toward the life that would make them legends and destroy them at the same time. They were guided by Edric E.D. Boyd, a street boss who had been taught by a former Young Boyz Incorporated lieutenant. Boyd taught them structure, discipline, how to move product without getting caught, how to build loyalty, how to think like businessmen, not corner boys. The lessons stuck. Both brothers were naturally talented. Meech had the kind of personality that could light up a room, and Terry had a sharp intelligence that could manage operations across state lines. They called themselves the 50 Boys. The name was simple and direct. They sold $50 bags of crack cocaine. No discounts, no exceptions. Their product was consistent. Their prices were fixed. And their reputation spread. Da Vinci, the actor who plays Terry in the Stars series, summed up the brothers' thinking. He quoted Marcus Aurelius and said, "Poverty is the mother of all crime." He added that the brothers were human. They had hearts, and they had not been given the same chances as other people. By the early 1990s, the 50 Boys were no longer a corner crew. They had outgrown Detroit. The brothers made a decision that set them apart from every other street organization in the city. They expanded not into the next neighborhood, not into the next city, but into other states. While most Detroit dealers were fighting over blocks, Meech and Terry were thinking about supply chains, distribution networks, and buying in large amounts. They studied the game the way business school students study case studies, except their case studies were YBI, the Chamber brothers, and the Colombian cartels that had flooded Miami in the 1980s. They found their supply a direct connection to Mexican drug cartels operating out of Los Angeles. This was the big break. Most street-level dealers bought their cocaine from middlemen, with each layer adding cost and risk. The Flenory brothers cut out every layer and went straight to the source. Mexican cocaine was shipped into Los Angeles and distributed through a network the brothers built from scratch. One city at a time, they renamed the organization. The 50 Boys became the Black Mafia Family BMF. The name was a statement. They were not a gang. They were not a crew. They were a family, a structured, disciplined, nationwide criminal organization that worked with the efficiency of a corporation and the loyalty of a blood oath. By 2000, BMF had set up cocaine distribution in 11 states: Alabama, California, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, and Tennessee. A 2-year federal investigation would later estimate their nationwide membership at over 500. Their Atlanta operation alone was moving an estimated 2,500 kilograms of cocaine every single month. The brothers divided the empire between them. Meech ran Atlanta, the distribution center, the party capital, the public face of BMF. Terry ran Los Angeles, the supply line, the operations, the connection to Mexico. It was a perfect split. Meech was the showman. Terry was the shadow. Meech was the lightning. Terry was the thunder. They transported drugs in stretch limousines with hidden compartments. They cleaned their money through fake businesses, real estate purchases, and a family-owned car service. They bought 13 mansions across the country. They collected Maybachs, Bentleys, Ferraris, and Range Rovers, the way other people collected watches. They wore jewelry from Jacob the Jeweler Arabo, the same man who made chains for Jay-Z and Kanye West. And they did it all as brothers. Big Meech once described BMF's culture in a recorded interview. He said, "You do not get nothing like this nowhere. Everybody moved like brothers, and everybody from different places, Milwaukee Street, Louis, Detroit, Texas, Atlanta, Christie, Florida. Everybody move as one. Everybody is prospering in some kind of way in their own way. Every man plays his own role, and everything starts with the leader. I am a good leader, so I got good people that follow. Simple. Simple." That was the word he used for an organization that made $270 million in cocaine revenue, employed over 500 people in 11 states, and had direct supply lines to Mexican cartels. Simple. In the early 2000s, Big Meech did something that no drug lord in American history had done quite the way he did it. He went public not with a confession, but with a record label. BMF Entertainment was officially a hip-hop promotion agency and record label. Unofficially, it was the most complex money-cleaning operation in the history of the American drug trade. And at the same time, it was real. That was the genius. It was not just a cover. Meech genuinely wanted to build a legal empire. Marshall Hoop, the journalist who wrote the definitive book on BMF, explained it clearly. She said she believed Meech had genuine hope that he could move out of the drug game and into a real business. That is not an unusual path. It is somewhat of a common idea, but for him it was maybe a matter of timing. BMF Entertainment promoted some of the biggest names in hip-hop. Young Jeezy, Fabulous, T.I., Trina Diddy showed up. J-Eazy showed up. If you were in Atlanta in 2003 and you were somebody in hip-hop, you knew BMF. They threw parties that shut down entire nightclubs, million-dollar nights where champagne flowed like water, and every person in the room was drinking $600 bottles on Meech's tab. BMF would roll into a club 50 deep, every man in the group wearing custom jewelry and designer clothes, and proceed to spend more money in a single night than most people earn in a year. They signed one artist officially, Blue Da Vinci, but the label's real product was the image itself, legal wealth, cultural power, and the undeniable feeling of men who had won the game. Meech socialized with music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, did business with New York's king of bling Jacob the Jeweler Arabo, and built connections with rap superstars who mentioned BMF in their songs for years after the empire fell. Meech rented a billboard in Atlanta that read, "The world is BMF's." He was not hiding. He was advertising. This was the basic problem at the heart of Big Meech Flenory. He was a drug trafficker who wanted to be a business mogul, a criminal who wanted to be a celebrity. He ran a cocaine empire worth $270 million. And he genuinely believed he could move into the music business and retire from the streets. And Terry, quiet, careful, thinking ahead, watched all of it with growing fear. By 2003, the brothers who had built everything together were barely speaking. The problem was simple and devastating. Big Meech could not stop being Big Meech. The parties, the jewelry, the groups of 50 people rolling into clubs at 2 a.m., the cars, the mansions, the billboard every night was a big show. Every appearance was an event, and every event was being watched by the federal government. Terry saw it coming. He was the quiet one, Southwest T, the operations man, the brother who kept the books and managed the supply chain and understood that the entire operation depended on staying invisible. He had been warning Meech for years. "You are too loud. You are spending too much. You are drawing attention. You are going to bring everything down." Meech did not listen. BMF members would later recall the brothers arguing publicly, shouting matches over small things that were really about the same basic disagreement. Terry wanted discipline. Meech wanted glory. Terry wanted to run a business. Meech wanted to run a culture. In 2003, they split. Terry moved to Los Angeles to run his own operation. Meech stayed in Atlanta. The empire divided in half, and, in dividing, it became weak. Here is the cruel truth. The split that was supposed to protect the organization became the crack that destroyed it. When the brothers were together, they balanced each other. Terry's caution held back Meech's excess. Meech's personality covered Terry's coldness. Apart, they were both exposed. Meech partied harder than ever, surrounded by people who told him what he wanted to hear. Terry, increasingly frustrated, vented his anger to friends and family, conversations that were being captured on federal phone taps. The investigation had been building for years. It started with small seizures and low-level informants in the early 1990s, long before BMF had a name or reached its peak. But the formal operation, called Operation Motor City Mafia, began on October 28, 2003. It was run by the DEA Special Operations Division in coordination with the IRS and the U.S. Attorney's Office. They worked from the bottom up. In September 2004, a phone tap on a low-level crack dealer named Raphael Smurf Allison in Atlanta led agents to a mid-level distributor named DeCarlo Hoskins. Hoskins told them about two brothers he had grown up with, Omari McCree and Jeffrey Lear, who were BMF members. The phone tap showed that McCree was a high-level distributor personally favored by Demetrius Flenory. In November 2004, Lear was pulled over on Interstate 75 inches Atlanta with 10 kilograms of cocaine in a duffel bag on the back seat. The pieces started falling into place. In April 2004, BMF courier Jabari Hayes was stopped on Interstate 44 inches Missouri driving a 40-foot motorhome. Inside the motorhome were two suitcases containing 95 kilograms of cocaine and a Range Rover in the back containing 572 grams of marijuana. By the time charges were filed, the government had built up 900 pages of written records from tapped phone conversations, mostly from Terry's phone. The brother who had warned Meech about being too loud had been caught talking too much himself. On October 28, 2005, the DEA moved in. 30 BMF members were arrested in a single day. $3 million in cash, and assets were seized. 2.5 kilograms of cocaine were recovered. Numerous weapons were also taken. The charges sought the giving up of more than 30 pieces of jewelry, 13 homes, 35 vehicles, including a Lincoln limousine, BMWs, Range Rovers, and Aston Martin and Bentley's numerous bank accounts, over $1.2 million in seized cash, and a money judgment totaling $270 million. Among those arrested were the brothers' father, Charles, their sister Nicole, and their girlfriends, whose names were on the titles of various homes and fake businesses throughout the country. The DEA used their family as pressure. Cooperate, or your father goes to prison. Cooperate, or your sister faces charges. The brothers cooperated. They took full responsibility on the condition that their family would be spared. Demetrius and Terry Flenory pleaded guilty to running an ongoing criminal organization. In September 2008, both brothers were sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Big Meech was 39 years old. Terry was 37. They had built the largest black criminal organization in American history. They had made $270 million, and they lost all of it in a single morning. Terry Flenory's Southwest T was the first to come home. In May 2020, during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, he was given early release for health reasons. He had served 22 years. He was blind in one eye from a serious eye condition. He suffered from high blood pressure and obesity. He was released to home confinement in Detroit. Big Meech fought for the same release. A federal judge denied it, saying Meech's prison record showed he had not changed and continued to promote himself as a drug boss. His record of problems in prison included having a cell phone, weapons, and drug use. Even behind bars, Meech could not stop being Meech. But time moved. His attorney, Brittany K. Barnett, fought without giving up. Judges removed years from his sentence. He earned his GED. He took classes in parenting, health awareness, and money management. He rebuilt BMF's image from a drug organization into what he called a community building movement. On October 16, 2024, Demetrius Big Meech Flenory walked out of the Federal Correctional Institution Coleman Low in Florida and was moved to a residential reentry program in Miami. He was 56 years old. He had spent nearly 20 years behind bars. His projected full release date was January 27, 2026. His attorney said she was overjoyed. Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, who had spent years bringing the brothers' story to television, who had first heard Meech's name mentioned in rap songs by Jeezy T.I. and Rick Ross, and who became so drawn in by the Flenory brothers' Rags to Riches story that he developed the Starz series himself, reacted immediately. His son, Lil Meech, who had played his father in 4 seasons of the series BMF, which brought the brothers' story to over 4 million viewers, posted the news to millions of followers. The show had done something remarkable. It had turned a drug conviction into a cultural event, a prison sentence into a story, and two brothers from Edsel Street into American mythology. LeBron James posted a welcome home message. The culture embraced him. Rick Ross had been rapping his name for a decade. SZA named a song after BMF. The legend had become bigger than the crime. But here is what the legend sometimes forgets. It forgets 1555 South Edsel Street, the small house near River Rouge in Ecorse. The father who played guitar and built things with his hands and refused to take drug money even as the mortgage was slipping away. The mother who ran a household on faith and food stamps. The stove that two teenage boys could barely light in the morning. It forgets that Demetrius Flenory wanted to be something before he became Big Meech. That Terry Flenory was being recruited by Western Michigan University before the streets pulled him in. That their sister Nicole stayed clean her entire life while her brothers built and lost an empire around her. It forgets that Charles Flenory, a carpenter, a songwriter, a man of God, watched his sons become the most powerful drug dealers in America, and then watched the DEA put handcuffs on him in his own house because his name was on a fake business he probably never fully understood. Two brothers from a small house in southwest Detroit saw their father struggling and decided they would never struggle like that. They turned to the streets because the streets were all that was available. And when they turned, they went all in, harder, further, and faster than anyone in American criminal history. They built a $270 million empire from $50 bags of crack. They employed 500 people across 11 states. They partied with the biggest names in hip-hop and wore jewelry worth more than the house they grew up in. And they lost it all. Their freedom, their fortune, their family's peace, 2 decades of their lives spent in federal prison cells, replaying the choices that started in a kitchen where the stove wouldn't light and the refrigerator was nearly empty. Big Meech is free now. Terry is free. Their father, Charles Flenory, survived it all: the poverty, the empire, the raids, the trials. He is still a musician, still a man of faith. And that small house on Edsel Street is still there. The stove still works. The mortgage is paid, but the price of paying it was 2 lifetimes spent behind bars and a family that will never be the same. That is the real story of the Black Mafia family. Not the Maybachs, not the champagne, not the $270 million, not the billboard in Atlanta that said the world is BMF's, not the record label or the celebrity friends or the $1 million nights in Atlanta clubs. 2 boys who loved their father too much to watch him lose, and a father who loved his sons too much to take what they were offering. That is the tragedy of the American dream, when the American dream was never designed for you.